more seconds, I'll make sure to announce it.
Thank you.
Okay, we are live.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the June 23rd, 2026 Finance Committee meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees. This meeting is now called to order at 6:04 p.m. Central Time. At this time, I would ask that the secretary would please call the roll of the committee.
Trustee Towns,
Here.
Trustee Trauber,
Present.
Trustee Winton,
Here.
Trustee Norfleet is not present, but we have a quorum present.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I would just like to first say thank you all for being here this evening. I know many of you have had a very long day. It is 6 o'clock in some parts and 7 o'clock in others, but the work that we do is very important. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your engagement. To President Tucker, staff and faculty members who are present, thank you for what you do. I know that the work that you do is hard work, and you work very hard to make us successful. So we are here to support you, and we look forward to your presentations tonight. If there are others visiting and joining us virtually tonight, welcome. Thank you for your interest in Tennessee State University. I want to assure you that as I sit in this seat as chair of the Finance Committee, our commitment is to be good financial stewards for this university, to advance sound policy that makes for a robust environment for our students, our faculty, and our staff. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. All of you should have received the agenda in the board portal and posted as public notice. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented, or if there are changes.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by aye as the secretary calls the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Aye.
Trustee Trauber,
Aye.
Trustee
Aye.
Winton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The agenda is adopted as submitted. All right, we'll move right into our action items. We have several items before us this evening. The first item is the approval of a new policy on the use of out-of-state undergraduate tuition and fees revenues. Our CFO, Ms. April Robinson, will provide an overview of this policy as well as the staff's recommendation. I will now turn the microphone over to CFO Robinson.
Thank you, Trustee Towns. So, and if it is okay with you, we have them all together, but after each section, I'll pause to allow the opportunity for the committee to take an action.
If I may,
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Secretary, is that appropriate? Do we take each action separately?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. Please proceed.
So starting with the approval of our out-of-state use tuition policy, this policy is required effective July 1st in accordance with House Bill 1833 and Senate Bill 2079 that was passed on May 1st. The summary information is included on the screen. The bill requires the Board of Trustees for each state to adopt and implement a policy regarding the use of revenues generated by the out-of-state undergraduate tuition and fees charged by the institutions governed by the respective board. And so the policy that has been put into place is one that reflects the brevity, but also making sure that we hit the required sections. So we start with Section 1.0, referring to the policy statement. It goes to Section 2.0, the importance and use for the policy, which is including establishing the framework that will respond to the newly passed legislation. We have the definitions to make sure that we include in-state versus out-of-state. And again, this policy is undergraduate only. We have the procedures, which really highlight first, the general use is in the first section, including academic instruction, academic support services, student services, and student success initiatives, faculty and staff compensation and benefits, financial aid and scholarships, facilities, infrastructure and technology, and then any identified strategic initiatives. And then the purpose, which is section B, gets down to the mitigation of in-state undergraduate costs. And it's really saying, as part of our annual budget and financial planning process, that the university will consider how all of these revenues can help mitigate tuition and fees costs for in-state undergraduate students, which may include, but not limited to, supporting institutional financial aid and scholarships, reducing tuition and fees and increases for in-state undergraduate students, offsetting instructional or operational costs, as well as investing in efficiencies or cost-saving measures. And then it ends with operational provisions, and then it has the code that was codified under the authority and references.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that summary of this bill. I would ask now if there are any questions from members of the committee.
None for me.
Yeah, I have a question. I noticed the comment that the policy reflects collaboration and discussion with other LGI CFOs and THEC. And does that mean that this policy is similar to or the same as other LGIs?
Yes, so one of the comparative policies that we didn't include it in board materials, but in the board portal is the MTSU policy, which is very, very close to the final one that you see here.
Would there be any reasons that our policy should differ from MTSU? Or asked another way, are we similar enough to MTSU that we should have the same out-of-state tuition policy?
So that was one example that was included. We did consider others as well, which included University of Memphis and UT. And so all of them take away I'll say the same tenets. And so where we landed felt good and fit for purpose for TSU.
Okay, meaning that we are similar to those other universities, or
we were similar in the areas that made sense. So for locality, we chose MTSU. We included a consideration for UT because it's another LGI university that has a similar out-of-state tuition makeup as ours, as well as University of Memphis. So I think all in all, the policy where we've landed was similar enough to the universities to take away the bits and pieces that we did to create this. And I think this one is fit for purpose for where TSU is.
okay, I'll stop there, but I may have some other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or discussion? If there are none, I would ask, I'm sorry? Yes.
Are you allowing comments or feedback from non-committee members?
Madam Secretary, what are the rules governing participation from non-committee members? I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah.
My apologies. That's actually not in our board bylaws. I can certainly consult Robert's rules, but typically we do allow comments from other committee members.
Okay.
It's at the, I would say we've done it at the chair's discretion.
Okay, Trustees Qualls, your question?
Thank you. It's really more so of a comment or something to consider, given that I did see on the other agenda that this was going straight to consent agenda, but wondering if, considering that sometimes 50% of our tuition comes from out-of-state students, would it be recommended that we include a specific line for reporting, annual reporting on how much undergraduate out-of-state tuition we received, what it was used for, and any alignment with our enrollment strategies? So it's not necessarily an approval, but because so much of our tuition is based on undergraduates out of state, I think that this would be something good to put in our policy, in annual reporting. The second thing that I would ask for consideration for this policy is, given our governance and operational history, one of the things that we may want to consider, not as an approval, I noticed there that it does have the president or the designee implementing this, but would it make sense to be more board facing and board oversight for it to at least be channeled through it, meaning the utilization of the funds, however they're decided to be used, but channeled through the finance committee for review? Those are just my two comments that I would add or consideration for this particular policy: annual reporting and routing through the finance committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? If none, I would call for a motion to recommend.
Trustee Towns, I
Yes.
think Trustee Teravidi had his hand up.
I'm
You may not
sorry,
be able to see it.
I cannot see it. Thank you for that.
Okay, I was about to flag that too. Thank you, trustee.
Okay,
Robert.
Can I go ahead?
yes, please.
Just a comment or a small clarification on this to CFO Robinson. For this out-of-state tuition, there is no separate provision between international versus out-of-state, right? It's the same out-of-state tuition policy.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's all I want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed you. All right, I believe that concludes our
Trustee Towns,
discussion.
could I
Yes.
ask one more question, or maybe series of questions? Just with Trustee Qualls's mention about our tuition revenue being 50% out of state.
Mhm.
And I don't know if CFO Robinson would know this. I mean, is that similar, or are there any other state universities that have that level or that percentage of their revenue coming from out of state tuition?
University of Tennessee.
So they have about 50% coming from out of state.
Roughly, I think theirs is a little less than that, but it's a significant portion. So call it 40 to 50%.
And do they have a policy that they've already approved? And does our policy, this proposed policy, differ much from what they have?
No, I actually don't know what actually got approved, because this was new legislation with the LGI CFOs kind of had an open discussion around this and kind of kept tabs on the elements that were being included. And one of the kind of key tent posts was just to give the university as much flexibility as possible, while still trying to make sure that we adhere to what is being required. So I would describe their policy as similar.
Okay. And then just one more comment, and it may be too late related to potential action on this policy, but were you able to assess? I'm not aware of any other states having a similar law that requires the universities to pass this type of policy, but I'm just wondering around the higher education landscape, if there are similar type laws or similar type policies that universities have about how they leverage out-of-state tuition to mitigate the cost of in-state tuition, and what other states or universities are doing where maybe we could have pulled or should be pulling some things into this policy.
No, I didn't refer to other states, and then I'm not familiar with if it exists in other states.
All right, thank you, Trustee Trauber. I will return to the business at hand and call for a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend to the full board approval of the new policy on the use of out-of-state undergraduate tuition, fees, and revenue. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been motioned and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Aye.
trustee Trauber,
Aye.
trustee Winton,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. We will now move to our second agenda item. I know this is a Finance Committee. Ms. Robinson, I will turn it over to you for the second agenda item, which is fiscal year 2026-2027 tuition and mandatory fee increase.
Trustee
Thank you.
Towns, excuse me,
Oh.
I have my hand up. I know it may be hard to see. May I ask a question here of process between you and Secretary Brown? It's been approved from this committee and going to the full board, but it's on the consent agenda. How are we acknowledging any considerations or amendments or edits to the policy before it's fully adopted from a non-committee member?
Yeah, so if you wanted to have it removed from the consent agenda, you can simply let me know so that it can be removed from the consent agenda to have further discussion on it and to make those recommendations.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm going to turn my mic off and yield to you, CFO Robinson.
Okay, thank you. So continuing ahead with the tuition, the recommendation from the university around a tuition rate increase. So as a review and reminder, this increase has a $425 estimated impact to a full-time undergraduate student. That increase is 4.5%. Made up of $300 for program service fees and then the rest with our maintenance fees. The university remains committed to positively impacting student experience and also making sure that we are conscious to anticipate cost increases that the university may have. Here, starting with the program service fees recommendation. These service fees were individually reviewed with the collaboration for most of them with the particular area asking and requesting for the increase. Our fees in general, many of them have not been increased in a few years. And so some of the benchmarking around the LGI revealed that we needed to get more in line with the LGIs. Some of them are related to specific funding around a few things that the university is implementing in this coming fall. Our tuition rate increase recommendations break down on our rate type as follows. So you can see again, referencing the in-state undergraduate is the 4.5 of the total increase for $425. And then the two places just to note where you see zeros in total percent increase are the out-of-state full freight undergraduate rate as well as the full freight graduate rate. Again, back to those two priority considerations for the university, one being making sure that we are at least being conscious around our anticipated cost increases. And so as you can see, if we just take our F26 E&G operating expenses, which exclude salaries, and just apply the 12-month CPI. So that's the consumer price index for where it's been over the last 12 months. And as you can see in note number 2, when you get into some of the specific increases are much more significant than that. But we're expecting an inflationary cost increase of $1.5 million. So that is our increase in the cost of doing everything exactly the same as it was done this year. And then again, to the point of remembering, making sure that student experience is top of mind, we've tried to isolate those areas where the university is anticipating investment, where the student experience will be positively impacted. And those includes repaving the Hale Residence Hall, investment in a better experience in our financial aid office, some renovations and furniture and fixtures for the existing residence halls, as well as a campus beautification project that's being funded by Title III that's expected to be operational by fall. Any questions? Okay. Trustee Towns, that was the end of this section.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your work and for that presentation. If there is no discussion, is there a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 2026-2027 tuition and mandatory fee increase?
I apologize, Trustee Towns. I do have some questions,
Okay,
if I may.
I will yield to you.
All right, thank you. So just remind me, CFO Robinson, last year, what was our tuition increase? Was it 6% or?
6.5.
Okay. What is and I think you walked through it, but I just want to understand that I'm thinking about this correctly. What problem is the tuition increase solving, or what is it intended to solve?
So it's intended to make sure we do two things. Sorry, let me just make sure. That we can anticipate expected cost increases for our business as usual inflationary pressures, as well as also being able to positively impact student experience.
Okay. Well, and on the cost pressure side, I mean, looking ahead to the budget discussion, our expenses are going to be significantly less from the prior year. So where is the cost pressure coming from in actual dollars from last year to this year?
Yeah, so some of the items that are presented in two, so around transportation, around our utilities, and around fuel and gasoline, because the 35.7 million excludes salaries. So this is just our operating expenses. So those are the key areas with, like I said, which are significantly more than the 4.2 that we're using, that we're expecting inflationary costs.
So is that cost actually reflected in the expenses somewhere? Because I'm trying to reconcile if our expenses are going down substantially, and I know there may be reasons why they're going down substantially versus the increases that are applying to these certain areas. But if we're going down substantially, what's the theory behind the increase and how that's funding these increases if in total our expenses are drastically being reduced?
Yes, and so I think to your point that you just hit on it, that when you look at our operating expenses for F27, they are a reflection of a myriad of things that are happening. But around these areas, we built in some of the cost increase, but again, we also didn't build into our budget the tuition increase either. So some of these inflationary cost increases are built in, but also they are being offset by some strategic decisions that are being made in order to lower costs as well. So it's a net impact.
And what kind of impact are we expecting that this would have on students and their ability to stay in school, or is it going to create pressure on certain students and their ability to stay in school because of the balances that they already have and obtaining, whatever type of aid or loans that they need, or even support from foundation or other scholarships that are offered?
Yes, so we're expecting a minimum impact to that. Included in the appendix of the board documents, board materials. We included a look at a breakdown by class and also by average balance, the recipients of foundation funds. And so really, we're talking about, so I think in those graphs, it was around 15 or 20 students had to receive funds who had balances $500 or less, and maybe like another 10 to 15 that were in that range. And so we're really not expecting for the $425 amount by year, right? So that's, less than $250 per semester to be a financial burden on students.
But that coupled with the increase last year, what does that translate into in terms of dollar amount with the 6% that was implemented last year?
A little short of $1,000, I think. Pretty sure.
And so the $1,000 total, you don't see that impacting students that may be at risk or on the brink, or are we even tracking, or do we have any metrics on students that may be just at that point where last year they weren't purged or were not in a situation where they needed financial support, but they may have been on the brink, and now an additional increase puts them past that brink?
Well, in all the data that we've reviewed, yes, we do have, and we can see, who received which balances. And so the vast majority of our students that received aid, they were larger balances, so a few $1,000s. And so even with last year's increase, we're not expecting a negative or adverse impact on students' ability to stay for around, $212 per semester.
Okay. And Trustee Towns, I would just say, given the 6% last year and the 4.5% this year, I'd be interested in hearing the rest of the committee members' thoughts around this increase and what impact they think it may have, or how we're strategically looking at the increase and how it affects, not only our budget in the short term, but our long-term prospects with students and how we fund the university.
All right.
I'll go first there. One of the key components, which was mentioned in our last meeting on May 15th, was the university wanted to provide some updated technological resources. And so when students access certain buildings throughout the campus, that technology was going to add some additional costs. And so the amount that you see accounts for those additional costs. And in addition to that, as CFO Robinson has already explained, one of the other key components of this is because we were not receiving enough funds to pay for the services that the students were receiving. So the tuition increase is designed to try to catch us back up for those services that those students hadn't been getting. I think all of us echo the sentiment that we want to ensure that the students have a great experience. We enjoy being able to offer a really quality product to students who decide to come to Tennessee State University at a price that is, I wouldn't say below average, but what I will say is that it is allowing for people to have access to an excellent education the price doesn't necessarily compute to that. And I think what we're trying to do here is just trying to catch up to where we were, recognizing that at some point in time we will need to flatten as we move forward. But as with everything else, we will try to handle things as we go along. But that's my personal thoughts on this, and that's why I'm supportive of the tuition increase.
Thank you. Other trustees? Uh, No additional comment? All right. Then I will return to my original ask of thank you all for your feedback. Is there a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 2026, 2027 tuition and mandatory fee increase?
So moved.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second,
It has been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Trobert,
no.
Mayor Winton,
Yes.
the motion passes.
Thank you all. We will move now to our agenda item number 4. This item is to seek approval of the fiscal year 2025, 2026 estimated budget. The materials for this agenda have been included in your packet for your review and posted on our public website. I will now turn it over to CFO Robinson for her presentation.
Thank you, Trustee Towns. So here is reflective of our FY26 estimated budget. Oh, and I want to make sure you can see the bottom. I can't see it on mine. Can you see the resulting surplus? No?
Yeah, I think it's based on the view of the frames on your computer.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to change your view.
Okay,
I can
Do
see
you
it
see where
now.
it says net surplus deficit 8596?
okay, I wanted to make sure you could see it. Okay, yes, so the estimated budget net surplus is 8596. The budget that you see includes, obviously, we've talked about our significantly lower freshman class than originally targeted, some strategic investments in enrollment and some critical administration functions, as well as personnel cost savings that will actually the payout is in the FY26 number. And just a moment on our FY26 budget, given all of the challenges that the university has had around enrollment, I really think that this is a number to be proud of. I know there was likely a lot of skepticism in the system around whether we could provide some operational and financial discipline and structure around ourselves in order to be able to overcome that really big revenue deficit that the enrollment number created for us at the beginning of the year. And so it's a good place to be where we're, in a stone's throw away from being right on top of our pro forma. And so this reflects the financial discipline that I know that this board is requiring out of this administration. And so we're moving forward ahead. And so here is showing where the estimated budget landed versus the one that you saw in October. Two adjustments to note: the $10 million just wants to take away the $10 million that's in our estimated budget that wasn't in the October budget that we received as incremental funds from the MOU agreement. So trying to keep apples to apples, the same thing with the 4.3 million for the VSP payout that's included in personnel costs in the estimated budget that wasn't in the October budget. And so then being able to look at that adjusted number and look at the variance and say, in totality, is the university better off than we were in October? And that answer is yes. Even when you exclude out the incremental $10 million that we received, our October budget was showing a $1.8 million deficit in this. And then the adjusted budget, right, showing a almost $4.7 million surplus when adjusting for those items that I mentioned. So again, just to reiterate that this budget and where the university is ending F26 highlights the work that is continuously being done to get the university on the right track. And here's a reminder of our strategic investments that are included in that number around enrollment, which as we'll talk about and show in our F27 budget, has paid off for the university and being able to completely turn around our enrollment trajectory. And that's the last slide for F26 estimated budget.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You guys, you've seen the presentation of the estimated budget, the 2025-2026 estimated budget. Are there any questions for Ms. Robinson? And I can't see if your hand is raised. Yes, just Trustee Trauber.
Yes, I have some questions.
Okay.
So I noticed in the materials, there's not a comparison to prior year. Would a comparison to prior year give us any pertinent information in determining how to look at or how to think about this estimated budget?
I think it would show more of the same of what's being represented on the screen here with comparing it to October and showing significantly continuously to reduce the university's overall cost structure. But then we would have the enrollment deficit. So I don't think it'll give you anything incremental that's new that the October to estimated budget doesn't highlight.
Okay, because I was thinking it may show, differences, whether positive or negative in, different line items that are represented here that might be instructive to understanding where we're doing better, where we may be doing worse, or different strategic ways we should be looking at the budgeting process. I was looking at some of the prior state controller financial and compliance annual audits.
Mm-hmm.
And I noted that we don't have the 25 fiscal year 25 audit released yet. So if we were to look at a comparison to fiscal year 25, would what you show us be reliable information given that it hasn't been through an audit process? And do we have the proper procedures and closing in place from the university standpoint to show something for the actuals from fiscal year 25?
Yes, I do think the information that's being presented here is reliable. I think
And I'm sorry to clarify,
Oh.
if you were to show us fiscal year 25, I mean, with the budget being reliable, I expect that would be reliable based on your budgeting process and the
Mhm.
budgeting process that's been put in place. But if we were looking at it for a comparison to fiscal year 25.
If we were looking at a comparison of fiscal year 25 versus it, I'm sorry, I just want to
Yeah,
make
would-
sure that I,
Would any fiscal year 25 information that you showed us be reliable? Because we don't have the audited fiscal year
Mhm.
25 that would have been through the comptroller's office. If you showed us information, would that information be reliable or as reliable as what would be shown from a state comptroller audit report?
well, as a CPA, I would never say that unaudited financials are as reliable as audited, just as a general sense of definition of the statements. But I do think they would be reliable enough to do a comparison. Yes, I do.
Okay, and I guess with that point about the reliability, what
Mhm.
information is the university using on a monthly or quarterly basis in terms of financial reporting to put together projections or give us information that would be deemed or that we could be deemed reliable, even if it's not audited, based on whatever closing processes you have in place on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis?
Yes, so that's a process that I'm looking forward to being able to integrate into our F-27 procedures, because as we previously discussed, we just in January, February for January close, started closing procedures. So this last 6 months has really been an opportunity to help the staff, and not just business and finance staff, but university staff kind of train on the job of getting used to being able to meet those requirements to close every month. And so I would definitely say that the university is significantly better than when we started. And so when we start providing quarterly first, and then later monthly, that it would be reliable information. But I would, you know, in higher education, having where we're not taking in revenue monthly, right? Our biggest revenue, I'll say, around tuition and fees, that monthly looks at our institution operations are not reliable, but not as beneficial to give you a true look. So that's why I said we should likely stick with quarterly. That allows us an opportunity to kind of settle into a cycle of what to look for. But when we provide it, yes, I do think it'll be reliable.
Okay, I just had two more points and then I'll be done. And I appreciate you, CFO Robinson, for entertaining all my questions. So in terms of the information I believe information for the budget would be submitted to TBR, and the format that we receive the reporting in, I'm not sure if that's the same format of what's submitted to TBR for TBR's review and approval of the budget. But what I have noticed, and I don't know that this is a question or a comment, but maybe if I say it and you have a response. So I noticed in looking at the state comptroller reports, the way that information is presented is vastly different from what we receive. So it's hard to do a true comparison of the numbers that we receive and reporting in these meetings in this format versus what's on the comptroller reports for the annual financial and compliance audits. And is there a reason why, or is it a way to streamline what's submitted to TBR in terms of the budget, what's actually reported out from the comptroller's office if we don't have the reliable processes set up with the university for accurate financial reporting, so that we make sure we're comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges? Because I had some difficulty looking at prior materials and making it all make sense of what is falling within what line item.
So I do have a comment, and so we have to make sure, I guess the format that we decided on here was one for board assessment of operational health, right? Because the comptroller forms, they have a bit of a different purpose, in that I'm pretty sure the forms that you're looking at, they are both E&G and restricted side of our business. And so that in itself creates a totally different purpose of the forms, or the view, right? And so we try to give you one here to really be able to assess the health of our E&G business, and don't really include much of our restricted side because it has a different purpose. So there may be some work, some additional perspective that we can give on those, but trying to compare those forms against what we have here will likely always be difficult because they serve two different purposes.
And thank you for that. And my last question, I know that prior question was so long that it may have seemed like two, and I apologize for that. But the last question, a little bit easier, at least to state. And looking at what we're viewing on the screen now under the state appropriations, I understand that includes money that we are receiving per the terms of our MOU. Is there a reason, and I noticed on this slide and then even in the appendix, there's a broken out of adjustments and then how that action affects the budget and the numbers. But is there a reason these one-time events aren't shown effectively, I'll call it on the after the bottom line, as bottom line adjustments, so we can have a better picture of what our operating income actually is, which I think once you net out those numbers, we still have a deficit. And I think that's what we should still be tracking as a board for oversight purposes of how well we are addressing that budget deficit and how well the university is addressing that budget deficit versus lumping in those one-time events above the line where it looks like it's reoccurring revenue versus the non-reoccurring revenue.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable request that we can, make sure we're including. We include the adjustments here in order to do that exact thing, to at least be able to identify it as something that's non-recurring. But to your point about making sure that the university is addressing our, structural deficit, I think that's a view that we can absolutely consistently provide.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Trustee Smith Knight has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to how we got to the estimated budget. Just wanted to confirm, April, this budget process and the estimated budget, we go back and look at actuals and what's happening current versus prior. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, so we locked our estimated budget, I think, through March actuals, and then made an estimate based on, considering everything. How many POs were outstanding, looking at last year's spend, and where each department was projected to come in to create an estimate for the last 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? If there are no questions, if there are no further questions, is there a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 2025-2026 estimated budget?
So moved.
It has been
Second.
moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
Trustee Trauber,
I abstain.
Trustee Winton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you all. Thank you for that discussion. CFO Robinson, we have one more item for you. That is item number 7. It is the fiscal year 2026-2027 proposed budget. And I will turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Trustee Towns. So entering into our F-27 proposed budget, as a reminder, just as a top level view, the university wanted to make sure that in this FY27 proposal, that it was fit for purpose to be able to effectively manage our cash flow. And that was our most important priority. And so we would, from a revenue standpoint, our revenue would be described as moderately conservative, while we've layered in expenses that were expected to a certain extent to make sure that if anything popped up, that the university would be able to respond, to be able to make sure that we could secure any payments and manage our cash. So in the FY27 budget, it includes a 1,200 freshman class. It includes a significant reduction in personnel costs, both the savings from the VSP as well as reflecting the gap that we had that we'll talk about from the VSP, as well as some strategic investments in enrollment, institutional advancement, athletics, and potentially real estate. So here's our FY26 estimated budget versus our proposed budget. Again, we've tried to adjust those non-recurring items to get to an estimated and then show a variance from there. Our proposed budget reflects a $796,000 surplus, which includes the monies expected on July 1st from the MOU agreement. But with those funds, that variance is 10.5 million. The F-27 strategic investments include, well, we mentioned athletics, our business and finance support, again, reflecting financial aid operations and TBR support around accounting and finance. Institutional advancement, making sure that the university is prepared for any potential alumni giving model support that's needed, as well as an increase in engagement around the anticipated fundraising $100 million campaign. Some additional incremental investment and enrollment around a software upgrade, as well as student affairs around residence hall conditions and improvement, as well as travel and operating expenses to support the away game heavy athletic schedule that we have for football this upcoming season. Here's our updated freshman enrollment. Right now, confirmed freshmen is right under 2,000 students. So again, talking about the F-26 investments that were made for enrollment are really paying off. The enrollment team's goal right now is to continue to increase that blue shaded area, which is the difference between our 1,200 student balance budget number and where we are. That allows us to be able to absorb any potential melt from both enrollment, registration, as well as potential purge impact. And as you can see at the bottom, two other kind of KPIs and metrics that we're making sure we're keeping touch on is our new student orientation, which is at 1662 with 574 already attended, as well as housing registration, 1285. This presents the gap in our VSP that I mentioned earlier. So in the proposed budget is a $4.8 million amount of VSP savings for personnel. In our initial VSP estimated savings that are included in the pro forma number, it was 12.2. And so that has left a $7.4 million gap that the university is actively managing to close already and preparing for the process to make sure that we can hit that number. So our personnel costs includes this gap reduction. And so I've listed just a few things on the side, but there are probably 5 more that the university is already considering to ensure that we hit the gap. So the column on the right is just showing the actual VSP numbers. But again, what's in the proposed budget, which was locked before the VSP numbers were final, is the 7.4, but the actual that we will have reflected in the October budget will be a $7.8 million gap. And that's all that we were going to recap for the F-27 budget.
April, thank you. You've heard the presentation on the F-27 budget. Are there any questions?
I have a couple.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to, I believe it was the first slide, and this is just for the deficit purposes.
Okay.
Just to make sure that I understand, without
Oh.
the $25 million appropriation that we're getting on July 1st, we'd be operating at a deficit of 23 million. Is that accurate, or what is the actual number there?
Yes. So it would be if you take away the 25 million and take away the surplus that we're showing, which is a little less than $1 million.
Okay,
So
thank you.
24.3, yes.
Thank you so much. And then on the athletics, we discussed athletics during our meeting on May 15th. And I think there was a question about the scholarships. And so I noticed here we've got some additional investment. So just trying to reconcile the changes from the meeting in May 15th versus today.
So these two strategic investments are included in what was presented in the athletic budget for F-27.
Okay, so at that time, it was a little bit less in scholarship funding than what, because I think there was a ongoing discussion about, do we have to reduce a little bit of the scholarship funds related and during the May 15th meeting? So are you saying that we had an increase, or we're still at that decreased level of scholarship funds?
So what's showing on the screen is for the scholarships is just related to men's basketball.
Okay. I think the question was about football, men's football. So thank you. That's helpful.
Yes, sorry, that's not on the screen. Yes.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you. And then finally, I think I have a question about in terms of revenue, in terms of how much do we actually get in? And I asked you this also in May.
That's okay.
So just want to make sure that we have it clear for the record. And then I think I know I'll be done in terms of that.
So how much do we collect in athletic revenue on an annual basis?
Yes, particularly as we would think about other peer OVC institutions.
Around 4 million.
Okay. And is that comparable to other OVC institutions?
It's in the middle of OVC institutions. And then, yes, so when you say there's a wide range, so it's in the range somewhere in the middle. So not the largest revenue, but not the smallest either.
Was the athletic director able to join?
He was
Secretary.
not available when I reached out to him earlier. I can certainly try and see if he's available yet. Chair Winton, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, give me just a second.
Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other questions? I'm sorry, I can't see hands raised.
I have a question, and
Yes.
maybe this question may be for you, Trustee Towns, and just how our committee is thinking about this proposed budget, and to piggyback on a comment Chair Winton made. If CFO Robinson, if you can go back to the slides showing the deficit
Yes.
or the action that would show what the ultimate deficit would be. And if we look at budgets that we passed, the past few budgets that we've passed, I think there's a deficit in every budget once you remove the one-timers. And we continue to pass those budgets. And I know we have a lot of challenges that we've identified that we're trying to improve. But Trustee Towns, if you could just give us some thoughts on direction for this board and how we're looking at those deficits and approving these budgets, and how we should be thinking about ultimately these one-timers and the effect that if those one-timers weren't applied, we'd be running at a deficit every year. And I can't recall, but I think TBR, they may have a policy or a law, or there may be an encouragement to pass balanced budgets or budgets that are in the black versus where we are operating in the red.
Trustee Trauber, yes, I will attempt to answer that. I would say first and foremost, as financial stewards for this organization, finances is our number one priority. Now, as I looked through the appendices, I saw where we had reduced our deficit. If you remove the one-time funding, I think last year, this year's 26 million, and maybe it's 23. So that is incremental change. I think our responsibility is to support the CFO and the president in their efforts to manage costs, to generate revenue. For the foreseeable future, we are dependent on these one-time fees. But again, our job, in my estimation, is to support the staff and the president in trying to get us to a sound and at least a break-even budget. Now, if you're running a $20 million deficit year over year, and again, you've been here longer than I have. I don't know how long it's been a $20+ million deficit, but it's going to take some time. And to get through that, we'll make some tough decisions. The tuition increase is probably an example of that. The voluntary separation program is probably an example of that. But it's our responsibility to take the recommendations from the experts, who is the chief financial officer and her team, and make the tough decisions to get us to structural soundness, to be responsive to the state stakeholders. That is what I see as our obligation. And I, again, don't have the slide in front of me, but in the appendices, I see incremental movement in reducing that structural deficit.
Yeah, thank you. And on the incremental improvement, one, and this goes back to my question about the comptroller financial and compliance audits, which I think will tell us actually how we perform versus what's in the budget. The budget is just a budget, so I don't know how directional or instructional it is to let us know whether the deficit is actually improving. But then also, if these were actuals and we've improved, $5 million off the deficit from last year to this year, projecting out how many more MOU payments do we have? And is that a rate that would be sustainable to get us to the break-even point? And if not, then what role does the board have to play in its governance and oversight to ensure we can reach that break-even point?
I will say this, as a fiscally conservative CFO, Trustee Trauber, I share in that urgency. I am not comfortable with having to rely on those funds. We are as the president reminds us, in a multi-year turnaround. So I know that it will take time, but also F27 is really the first year that becomes our baseline of the transformation, right? Because our F26 budget has that, 457 freshman class. And so structural budget before or after, us being able to get to the finish line and being in decent shape with the state's MOU funds, like I said, is something to celebrate. But F27 is where we're really looking to accelerate the pace. So to your point about a run rate, right? If you look at where we have reduced the budget, and is that rate going to carry us through 2030, which is when the MOU funds end, we're not expecting it to, because we're expecting to accelerate the rate every year. So our 1,200 freshman class is a really good example of that. We looked at the slide and our confirmations around 1,900, right? And so that is a direct positive impact on us being able to accelerate our deficit closure that is not reflected here, that we're expecting to pick up, and we'll have a better picture for the October budget. So that is not lost on me. I share your concern and your urgency for making sure that we're being aggressive around how we're practicing financial stewardship.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Any more questions before we move to a motion on this item?
Chair,
Chair Towns? Go
yes,
ahead.
I was just going to note that AD Allen has been able to join us. And then also we have hands up for Trustee Smith Knight and Trustee Qualls. Thank you.
Trustee Smith Knight.
Thank you. I do want to make sure that we are clear about the financial budget compared to audits. And I just need you to correct me if I'm wrong, CFO Robinson. You know, audits have the benefit of hindsight. So things already took place. And so throughout the year and when we're putting together these budgets, we have to make the best guess or estimates that we can based on what we know our current situation is. And I just wanted to clarify and confirm that this budget reflects what we know based on what we have to spend, given the challenges that we have from whether it's prior year or, you know, next upcoming fiscal period, that we have to take into account a budget that truly reflects what we are anticipating we have to spend. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Qualls.
Yes. So April, and President Tucker may have to weigh in on this as well. You may have some of your other colleagues, but one thing that I don't really see reflected in our budget, and it's a great problem to have, is our budget is based on 1,200 first-time freshmen. But our numbers, we're expecting, maybe 15 to 18, 1,900 first-time freshmen, which would push our total enrollment based on some of the other numbers that you've given to maybe up to 5,000 or so students. Can you walk us through why you decided to keep it at 1,200 students, basing this budget on 1,200 versus a slightly higher number? And then, what were some of the decisions to do that, to keep it at 1,200? And the second part to that question is, for the additional revenue that we will gain, whether it's from the additional 600 or so students and the 4.5% increase in tuition, should it pass, do we have a plan for how we will use those funds, particularly given our history of retention? We don't do well with large classes. And so how are we going to utilize those additional funds to ensure the student support and academic success for that freshman class? Because we are outcomes-based funding and not just enrollment for revenue. Sorry for the long question, but it's...
No, that's okay. I think I got it. I may have to revisit the second one. But
Okay.
First, with why we decided to stick with the $1,200. So 1,200 students for freshman enrollment. So again, where we are now is also the benefit of 3 additional months, right? This budget was locked. I'm pretty sure it was, call it early spring. And so because these decisions of spending of each department's allowable spend has to be based on a target that we know or feel reasonably sure that we can hit, including, especially at that time, we probably were only around 13, 14 at the time. So including those confirmations and, scaling it up on a projection was not considered prudent, because what we didn't want to happen is to commit operational and departmental budgets based on that enrollment, and then having to walk it back and then cut the budgets. So it was decided that we would take a conservative approach for where we were back in early spring, which was still, we were there from a confirmation standpoint, but we weren't there, I'm pretty sure not from a, new student orientation. So all of this information and continued work that has been done over the last 3 months. And then to your second question around how are we planning to make sure that we're good stewards of the additional revenue that we have. So one, still in as a university that has little to no reserve fundings, that's still top of mind for us. to make sure you can't, it's really difficult to be a university in good financial standing with no reserves. And so where we have excess of revenue, that will probably be our primary start to make sure we're funding some rainy day fund for the university, and then looking at opportunities for us to, continue to make sure we're hitting student success and also student experience positively.
Can you remind me, what are our outcomes metrics? I know what they were before. I think they've changed now. Do you know what they are? What are our outcome weights?
So they're actually changing. We're at the end of the 5-year cycle. Of course it's graduation, but remember it's now going from a 6-year to a 4-year graduation metric as the primary one. And then there are some KPIs around the type of students that we serve. And I'm sorry that I'm missing a couple more.
I can follow up with you later, but previously it was because we were considering the R2 to R1 pathway, there was 20% of our weight was on research and expenditures. But as that changes, just kind of wondering where we are with our outcomes, particularly as they're changing, and how we're going to map those with our success and academic success measures. But just wanting to make sure that we're clear, and I don't see it in the budget on how we are actually supporting this large class for academic success and student success, particularly given the flat rate of the expenditures. I'll ask this part and then I'll be quiet and let Dr. VT ask his, but you mentioned the strategic investments, but one area that again is obviously kind of missing on the strategic investment is anything in the academic affairs piece. How is academic affairs, the core part of our business, of why we're here, how are we prioritizing that in this budget? Can you speak to that any? And what trade-offs might have been made to make those strategic investments?
Yes, so what you're not seeing here, that's not included in our E&G budget is our Title III activity. So the primary portion of our student academic success lives in Title III. Various programs are dedicated to freshmen and sophomore. Making sure that each of those students, particularly the freshmen, are advised and supported, and as well as advisement, tutoring is in their career readiness, all housed in Title III.
I'll come back, but I'll let Dr. VT has his hand up.
Thank you, CFO Robinson, for a wonderful presentation. I have just a couple of questions.
Yes.
Regarding the VSP and closing the gap for 7.8 million, and
Yes.
also looking at the personnel expenses going down from around 100 million, 96 million to 89 million.
Yes.
Would it be fair to think there will be right sizing of faculty, staff, or administration to reach that closing the gap? Because the three items which will close the gap, as seen in the slide, hiring freeze has been there for 2 years almost, and non-faculty recruitment, all these were on hold for last couple of years. So regarding the tough decisions Trustee Towns has been talking about, so would there be some tough decisions with right sizing? Would that be fair to the think? And a follow-up of that, now that we estimate a larger class, we have to have a balance between taking a tough decision on right sizing versus meeting the needs for a big class.
Yes, good question. I think it is fair to say that it is one of the elements to close the gap that is being considered. It is one of the levers that the university has and will consider. And you're absolutely right about making sure that whatever decision is being made, whether it's around housing or a potential workforce realignment, that we're keeping in mind that this large incoming class still needs to be supported in all of the different areas that we'll be looking at. So point noted and taken.
Thank you.
All right. I think the AD has joined us. Is that correct, Secretary Brown?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did you have comments or questions for him, Chair Winton?
Yes, I don't know, AD Allen, if you were on the line, but I'd ask about in terms of how do we pace with major sports revenue, particularly across other OVC institutions? And then when we get those funds in, does that money go back to athletics or does that go into the overall budget? I think CFO Robinson estimated around $4 million in revenue from athletics.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. And so the way our budget is obviously designed in concert with the Business and Finance Office and under CFO Robinson's leadership, what we do, we provide all of our revenue expectancies, specifically in categories such as game revenue, game guarantee revenue, ticket sales, parking. We do not get concessions. I'm sorry, we do not get royalties on apparel sales. I wish, I could report that. I did change the logo. I remember when, some of those shirts used to stay on the shelves with the mange tiger, but we refined it. But we do generate a lot of royalties. COO Oglesby would have to speak to the royalties that are generated on the apparel and merchandise sales side. But we obviously we report those expectancies from a projection standpoint, and then our budget is built out. From a revenue standpoint, last year we had a phenomenal year. We finished at 1.78 in ticket sales. Prior to last year's revenue in football, we were around $688,000. Now we did have two additional games. We had the Howard game, which everyone loved, but we were phenomenal there. And then basketball, we were at, tell you the number in basketball from a revenue. Yeah, basketball, we were almost at 300,000 with $288,000 in basketball ticket sales. And that's pretty well in terms of the size of our program. We pace ahead of all of our OVC peers in revenue generation. And this is going to be a big year for us with the Jackson State game. We expect to sell out Vanderbilt. We have a game guarantee against Georgia at 600,000. Our basketball guarantees right now we're around 300,000, so we should end up above $1 million. And this information has been shared with the CFO. But this will be, since I've been here, our highest revenue generation year in athletics. So we're excited about that. But when I build out our schedule, when I look at revenue opportunities and sponsorships, and we're going after sponsorships, we're almost at $450,000 from a partnership standpoint. But when I build it out and when we're going after these revenue spaces to generate revenue, we're always keeping in mind that we want to decrease our subsidization amount. And I would say right now we're around 60%. CFO Robinson could do more research, but my last research, we were around 60%. Other schools in the conference are teetering above 82 to 85% subsidization.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Lady Allen, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. To the $4 million that I said in revenue for F26, did you agree with that $4 million?
You said it was 4 million?
Yes, that we show for F26?
Yes.
Okay, because we do show that there were prior years, so last year and the year before that, and I think the year before that, that the revenue was more. So I just wanted to make sure that when you said this has been our highest revenue period, make sure that we were talking about the same thing.
Yeah, so you reported a revenue at 4 million for FY26 at 4 million?
And F25 was 4.6 million, F24 was 6.2 million, F23 was 5.4 million. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to make sure that I was looking at the right.
yeah, that I'd have to look back at subsequent years, but to me, when in my research, this was the highest year we've had from a revenue generation standpoint. So we need to get together and cross-reference those numbers
Yes.
because I don't know what's in there in prior years, but I know we had 8 football games this year, and so when you look at our revenue, it does not show me that we had any other years that we generated more. Now, I was tied to those years, so if we were doing it big like that, it was part of my leadership too. But I'd say this, I don't show that.
Okay. Yes, I was just pulling straight from Banner, our Banner
Right.
system of athletic revenue,
Yeah.
which includes all of the components that you mentioned. So yes, we can get together. I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure
let's get together on that.
that the 4 million for F26 was
Because if you got
aligned.
a higher amount, I need to be giving myself a pat on the back for 24, FY24, 23, 22.
All right.
All
Um,
right.
Thank you, AD Allen. Chair Winton, did you have any more questions regarding athletics?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We
I
are,
do. Is Trustee Towns, I have a question for the athletic director, and I have one more follow-up on the FY27 proposed budget.
okay.
So, AD Allen, I'm sure you saw there was an article that dropped this weekend, New York Times, The Athletic, speaking about our hockey program. For the record, can you just give some clarity or clarify what's the status of this hockey program? And I mean, there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of talk going on. And like I said, the New York Times article that dropped is creating a little bit more buzz. But can you just kind of give us some direction or clarity as it relates to that hockey program?
Absolutely. First of all, congratulations. I wasn't around Chair-elect Towns, so congratulations and look forward to your leadership. But to answer your question, um, we we've had great conversations with the NHL and the Predators organization. Recently, they've taken over Centennial, the facility there. They've communicated, they being the Predators leadership, the president, the marketing director, the COO, they've communicated that they want a strong partnership if we can get this program launched by granting us space in that facility, much like the space that we have in Nissan Stadium with the Titans. We'd have an opportunity to have a locker room in that space. We'd have an opportunity to have free ice time for competition, for games. We'd have an opportunity to generate revenue because right now in the hockey space in the city, there's no Division I college program. Vanderbilt does not have one. MTSU is neighboring us. They do not have one. The University of Tennessee does not have one. So you have a lot of hockey enthusiasts that not only follow professional hockey, but they also follow college hockey. And when this was discussed and we were talking about breaking history, when our financial position was communicated that it was different than it is today under prior leadership, the Predators really leaned in and the former president really want to attack this initiative and go forward. And so, we've been trying to make sure that we did our due diligence and made sure we had performers built out that spoke on the expenditures and different costs such as scholarships, operating expense, travel, etc. I would say when we look at our conference peer, which Lindenwood University has a hockey program, they operate their hockey program at $750,000 annually. We've done our performer right now based on $1.5 million per year. That has been shared with the NHL and with the Nashville Predators. And the Predators do want to come in and provide 2 years of upstart funding so we can, quote unquote, break the ice with this historic program. And that would be between $2.5 to $3 million. Okay. And then during the first year, they want to help us fundraise with their existing partners 125% of our operating expenses for year one and all years subsequently after that. So that would be, if they came in an initial $3 million per se, then they would also, during the first year and years after, be trying to build a war chest of additional funds. So we would always be ahead from year to year. And so, that piece of information was I didn't see it in the article, but from across the landscape of college athletics, it'd be phenomenal if we could launch this program. Dante Erber Company's done a really, really good job of making sure that he has a full engagement in the community with our Big Blue community, but also youth hockey. There's opportunities for camps and clinics, and I really think that if we can get this off the ground, it would be sustainable and generate revenue for our program. And I want to say it's just not only history, but if it's worthy of the New York Times reporting on it and ESPN having it on, on their ticker, I think it would be great for the university. But obviously, we have to make sure that we exercise our fiduciary responsibility and do it the right way. So the numbers that I spoke of, the year that they would want to bring it forth will be 2027, Trustee Towns. So right now everything is in deliberation, and those conversations have been had with our partners, with President Tucker, myself, the hockey coach, and other executives with the Nashville Predators.
Thank you, Dr. Allen, for that explanation. So everyone is clear where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Towns, may I go back to CFO
If you would,
Roberts?
please, and then we'll move to our motion. Thank you.
Okay. I get them out now so I don't have to do them in the full board. So a simple question, I think it's simple, just to make sure I'm understanding. If we have an increase of freshmen, what percentage of those freshmen are on scholarship? And if we do the tuition increase, how much of that scholarship expense is also going to increase with the increase in tuition for our scholarship recipients?
I am not definite on our percentage of scholarship rate. As you know, the university's goal has been continuously over the last couple of years to drive down. I think we were at around 50%, whereas the norm is around low 20s. And so I do think we're getting closer to that, but I would have to follow back up with you to see the composition of this freshman class.
Perfect, thank you. And the last question, just in the spirits of transparency here, as we have always been, and I appreciate your presentations and your explanations. As we look at on the proposed budget, the expenses and the reduction of personnel costs, if we're just to do a little bit of level setting, we do, and this also may be for President Tucker to chime in on as well, but we do have some key leadership roles that have been in interim status for quite some time, particularly the provost. I know we have general counsel. We are still have an opening for a communications person. How are those being accounted for, even though we have a reduction in personnel costs?
How are the interim roles being accounted for?
Yes, can you talk through any of the assumptions on those salary lines? And so any unfilled or permanent roles, are we keeping them at interim, or are we going to launch some national searches? And also in the personnel cost roles, I think I'm on slide 29 there. Are we including or considering any tenure and promotion for next year as well?
I'll let the president speak to the actual decision points on those strategic items, but just from a logistics standpoint of the budget, if there is a role that is in interim status, the budget is not the salary of the interim person plus the salary of the permanent position. So it's one position that's included the salary assumption in that personnel line. So it's not double counted or is not counted differently from a budget perspective.
The second part, is President Tucker on?
Yes, I'm on. We have not made a decision yet to launch a national search for a provost. I think right now we're still trying to get to some of the structural changes that need to take place because I think the job description for that position is slightly a little different from where we are right now in terms of focusing on cost reductions. So I haven't determined the timeline yet, but we will run a national search for a provost. As it relates to communications, I think we're holding on right now with that. And that's a position down the road too that we also potentially want to fill. But it's a balance between ensuring that we're cutting costs and not adding costs at the same time, but trying to move the university forward. So at some point we will fill the VP of communications job, but right now we're okay in that position.
And the other assumption with the personnel costs, particularly faculty and academic costs, are we considering or including any promotion or tenure for FY27?
That's not in the current budget because we still have too much staff in relationship to the students that we serve.
Do you mean faculty or staff?
Faculty. And a little bit in some places with staff as well. But faculty is still significantly above for the enrollment that we currently have and project to have in the next couple of years.
Okay. And April, last question is just a clarifying question. On the slide where you talk about, let me get back to the number. It's slide number 20. No. It's slide number 21.
Can you tell me what's on? I can't see the page numbers on.
Personnel cost reduction planned action.
Okay, yes.
FY27. Just a clarifying question here. If we're talking about personnel cost reductions, what does the contract review of third-party services, how is that impacting the personnel E&G line if they're contractors?
So this remaining gap, we inserted the contract review of third-party services as an overall. So where we can, though we know that from a personnel cost standpoint that we need to be at a certain number, but also cognizant of we have other layers, other levers that we can pull. So it would not impact personnel cost here, but just thinking about the $7.4 million deficit as an overall gap to be closed.
Do you have any idea, just from the items that you have listed here, what percentage it would be against that 7.4, 7.8 million?
The contract review?
Yes.
It's in progress, so no, I don't have a percentage. Much of that is coming from, will be the result of some RFP processes that are currently or just about to start related to those. So no defined amounts there yet.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all for that discussion, your inquiry. I will now call for a motion to recommend to the full board approval of the fiscal year 2026-2027 proposed budget.
So moved.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Trauber,
I abstain.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. I know we've got another meeting of the full board and it's getting late and you all worked all day, but we have one more agenda item on this finance committee, and that is consideration and possible action regarding a real estate transaction. And I am going to turn it over to you, President Tucker.
Okay. We've got an outside resources that have been helping us take a look at our assets. And I think Chris is going to make a presentation here. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right.
That's great. Thank you very much, President Tucker, and good evening to the board here. Very pleased to see you again. I've got my colleagues Jay Brown and Sarah Khalil on the call as well, and we're all available to answer any questions that you might have as we move forward. So I'll just call for the slides to be moved on when we're needing to go. That's fantastic. Thank you. So before we dive in at this point, I wanted to just touch on the airport site that we're looking at the moment, and our recommendation to TSU to make a disposition of the site with an expectation that would be negotiated on a bilateral basis with the airport authority. So that's kind of where I wanted to start the discussion, and the slides are kind of geared up to speak to our rationale for that position and to set out some of the next steps. I'll pause at the end of each slide to be able to field any questions, because I realize that we've had a few go-rounds with this, but this is sort of the first time that we've really made a clear recommendation for making a disposition for the site and for the way forward as well. And so we just want to make sure that everyone's got plenty of time to consider this, but being mindful of the fact you do actually have a board meeting coming up in a few minutes as well. So we wanted to start here and say that what we thought a pyramid was a very good way to kind of describe what's been done in relation to the airport site at this point. The first step that was taken was before the Christmas holidays. We did a phase one piece of work where we looked at benchmark data for a number of potential properties in order to assess what the value of those properties might be. And in relation to the airport site at Cockerell Bend, we had done an analysis of CoStar data and a range of other sort of sources that provided an indication of the value of the site in comparison to other dispositions in Nashville that were of a comparative nature over recent years. So this was kind of the general kicking the tires, as we called it at the time, of determining what the value of the site might be. And we did at that point come up with an estimate of around $9 to $12 million, depending on the nature of the entity that would potentially take the site. So that was really kind of a scouring of the market in a general sense in order to place the airport site in context and then allow for the next step of the of the valuation process to go forward. And at that stage, we'd made no determination about who would be best placed to take on the site, although we were aware of the airport authority's interest at that point. So I'll go on to stage two and the next step, which is about appraisal. Just if there was any sort of reminders or any questions, just going back to that first phase of work that we did in response to the MOU before the holidays. Very happy to kind of refresh that discussion if that would be helpful. All right. Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please. So in April of this year, we worked with Will's team, who is on the call today as well, to commission on behalf of TSU an appraisal from a local appraiser, Alliant Commercial Appraisers, in order to be able to obtain an appraised valuation for the site that was on the basis of if the university decided to take the site to market, what could it achieve in terms of evaluation, and what was some of the context in which that valuation could be achieved? What did that look like? And so the appraiser took 4 comparative sites, followed a recognized approach to appraising the site, chose a method called the sales comparative method by which he took 4 comparable sites, all industrial, all in the same Cockrell Bend Northwest portion of Nashville as comparators, and came up with an appraised value of about $15.5 million for the disposal of the whole site to the market. And one of the things that was key, I think, that came out of that work, as well as the actual valuation itself, was a note that if you looked at this site in comparison to others, those comparative sites, in order to achieve their valuations, had been on the market for around 9 to 18 months in order to, before the dispositions had taken place with those comparator sites. And so that was seen as being instructive for TSU when considering the disposition of this site as well, that in order to achieve the appraised value, it would need to be on the market for, potentially 9 to 18 months. There's a lot kind of going on underneath the pond surface with that appraisal as well. So I'll touch on this in a second, but just before moving on to the appraisal that the TSU commissioned, were there any questions about that appraisal process, how it had been put together? All right.
So,
That's great.
Chris,
But yeah,
what's leading to the difference in, and maybe you're going to get on this or get
Yeah.
to this in the next slide, the vast difference between the first appraisal value or estimate range and what we're seeing with this appraisal value?
Okay, so when we were looking at the original piece, which was sort of $9 to $12 million, as we said at the time, this was very much it was a very high level, a very high level valuation based on the residual value of the property and based on comparison across the entire Nashville region, rather than looking at a detailed review against dispositions within this particular subsector, which is Northwest industrial properties. So at that stage, as we were looking along with 15 other sites as well, the intent was just to get a broad picture of where there could be a financial value at that point. And so when you looked at the Cockrell Bend site compared to a region-wide basket of comparators, we ended up with what turned out to be a conservative estimate at that $9 to $12 million. What we're looking at here is a much more focused appraisal done by a professional Nashville-based appraiser who is looking at properties that are in the very specific subsector in which Cockrell Bend is located. And so we consider this to be a refinement of the piece of work that we had done in the original phase.
And should the appraisal just be limited to the Cockrell Bend area? I mean, looking at the larger Nashville market and industrial property, I'm just wondering, would there be better data points around the Nashville region just rather than just the Cockrell Bend area? Or maybe I misunderstood the appraisal methodology being used.
Right. So the appraiser had looked at it focusing on this particular area because it had common characteristics. This site had common characteristics with the other sites that were in this particular area. The concentration of commercial and light industrial properties adjacent to each other, as well as adjacent to this, was different to a wider basket of properties. And we'll get on to the airport authorities appraisal that they did as well, and some of the differences in approach that they took from TSU's appraiser. The appraiser here took the view that because you had that concentration of commercial properties and industrial properties near to each other, the sales comps of those were more relevant than taking what might be a similar type of property, but not located in a similar like industrial sector of town across the region more generally. And so that was the sense that this was more accurate because it was looking at this property in its context of much more like properties in that particular area. Does that get your point, Trustee?
It does. So would that mean that other submarkets would have varying ranges for, I mean, if we were looking at properties in the Smyrna, Laverne area or in the Mount Juliet area or Lebanon area, would those areas have varying ranges per square foot or per acre in comparison to this submarket of Cockrell Bend and Nashville, or would they be similar?
Oh, sorry. So that's the rationale that's being followed by the appraiser. Yes, correct.
Yeah, and that Trustee Jay Brown with Hyde Brown, that is essentially what would be expected. I can't tell you whether those submarkets are higher value or lower value right now, but this appraiser followed pretty well-trotted appraisal methodology and comparables that were probably the most relevant to this site. But yeah, any other submarket would have different per square foot and per acre values for sure.
And actually, Trustee Trauber as well. When we get onto the next slide, which is where the Airport Authority did its own separate appraisal that was done independent of TSU entirely, they did take a wider view of the Nashville market, and we can get onto the results and how that kind of resulted in a slightly different valuation again. Were there any other questions on this piece? All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so in March of this year, the Metro Nashville Airport Authority conducted its own appraisal. They had expressed an interest in the site, and I think that had been, commonly available that they had been interested in the site and had gone ahead and commissioned the appraisal. What we've got here is a side-by-side. I don't propose to dive into the detail unless there are any particular questions, but I think the key features to kind of tease out here are both the TSU's appraiser and the Airport Authority's appraiser followed the same overarching approach, which was the sales comp approach to establishing the appraised value. Both appraisers used 4 different sites, and the choices of sites were broadly the same in terms of them being for light industrial sites and comparators. So to that extent, they were of a broad, they were sales in a similar range of time as well. And so at that macro level, it was a very similar kind of approach. And again, I think that gave some credibility to both appraised numbers. Where they differed, and you'll see in terms of the valuations that arrived at the bottom of the page here, the appraiser for the Airport Authority came up with a lower figure, somewhere between 10.5 and roughly $13.5 million for the site. What they had done is they had made discounts for the value of the comparator sites against the university's airport site based on what they perceived to be deficiencies in the university's airport site itself. In particular, they provided an across-the-board 15% discount for the fact that the airport site has a slope on part of it, and so they considered the topography to be a factor that should reduce the value of the airport site. They also picked their comparators from across the Metro Nashville area. One was in the area where the university's site is based, so around Cockrell Bend. But the other 3 were in a variety of places to the north and east of the city that didn't have that density of commercial and industrial use that is around in the Cockrell Bend area. So due to these particular subjective aspects of the approach, they arrived at a figure that was lower than TSU's appraisal view, but fundamentally they did follow the same overarching approach. Our view was that when we looked at the Alliant and TSU appraisal, that this was robust, that the location of the comparators was, was solid, and that there was the level of topographical or other features of the university site didn't necessarily lend themselves to such a drastic reduction in value compared to some of the comparator site. But we did see that there is an area of subjectivity between, when you get to this level of appraisal. And so there was some flexibility potentially if the university was minded to negotiate around that $15 million value. There is some scope for doing that given the inherent subjectivity in those kind of like micro aspects of the appraisal. So I'll just pause there for a second, just see if there are any questions on the Airport Authority appraisal or the comparison.
Chris, how should we think about an appraisal or these competing appraisals versus the value that might be gained from a competitive bidding process that would include the Airport Authority or any other parties interested in the property?
So our view, after having looked at this at this point, is that we have two appraisals that, while different, are close enough and similar enough to indicate that we are materially at a number that would seem to be appropriate, somewhere between $13 and $15 million. Seems to have been supported by two independent appraised positions. Our concern with going out to a full market process at this stage is that piece that the appraiser of TSU's appraiser put into their view, that you're looking at 9 to 18 months to achieve just the appraised value that they are suggesting. So in principle, there could be another offer out there that is higher than this appraised amount, but just to get the appraised amount, TSU's appraiser is suggesting a 9 to 18 month period. And our feeling is that we have not seen any written evidence of a higher appraisal being available out there, and that if the university is seeking to obtain a receipt as swiftly as possible, going out to market speculatively, in our view, would not necessarily garner a larger sum and would delay the production of a receipt for the university. So our sense is that there's nothing we've seen that indicates you could get a higher sum than this from going out to market at this stage.
So are you saying if we went out to market with a competitive bid process, we wouldn't have the same opportunity with the Airport Authority plus other parties, or am I misunderstanding?
No, sorry, no.
What we're saying, what we're saying is that we don't see evidence because of essentially the three different approaches to valuation and the two appraisers especially, that you're within the market right now. So if in theory somebody could come out of somewhere and offer something that's above market, and you could sort of take that bet, but you might be risking a long time and a change in the market over that period of time that may cut the other way. So what we're saying is that the relationship between the two appraisers, our sense of the market, are all within a reasonable market range for what competitive bids would be like in the marketplace, that you're in a good position to negotiate and get a transaction done sooner, as long as it comes within these ranges. And that's a better risk to you than waiting 18 months with the hope that someone will pay above market. This is market.
So are you saying you've seen deterioration in the industrial market in Nashville? Or
no, what we're saying is that right now, you went to market today, these numbers and the analysis that we've looked at says that the market is somewhere between, call it, 10.5 to $15 million. That's a pretty wide range, but let's just say that's the range. You're going to get bids that come in a whole lot lower than that competitively. You may get one or two that comes in higher, but this is the market today, given the knowledge in the market, given what cap rates are and what trades are in the market today. But if it takes 18 months to do that transaction, the market could change, and it could change the other way. So what we're saying is that this is the market today. If you can execute sooner, you're grabbing today's market.
Right. And what I'm asking you is, based on trailing evidence, have you seen deterioration in the market, or have you seen the market?
We're seeing, based on what the appraiser identified, we're seeing slow execution in the market.
But I'm talking about market value, not execution. If we're just talking
No, we're
about
not saying
value.
we're not necessarily seeing a decline, but we also aren't seeing any evidence that there's an increase either. So we're saying, all things being equal, this is the market today, and you've got potentially an offer that's within the market range on the table. If the airport appraisal, which we're assuming is roughly the negotiating parameters, was way off, we'd say don't waste your time. These guys are, they're blowing smoke. Let's go to the market. But because their appraisal is within reason to what we think the market is doing, we're saying you've got a captive audience, you should pursue it. If at the end of the day you can't, if you can't get a deal done, that's a different story. But we're saying if they're close enough, you should consider it.
And I guess I'm just trying to, and maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, and you can tell me if I am. What would be the downside of testing the market with the competitive bid process, given that we do have a bird in hand with someone that does want the opportunity to discuss with us selling the property and potentially selling within this range that's been quoted from these appraisals? Because obviously, or at least the way I'm thinking about it, if there's one person out there that has already raised their hand, I mean, there could be many more. And just given the industrial market generally and in Nashville, which I'm not hearing that it's been deteriorating, and I'm just wondering what the trajectory has been and what the projected trajectory is. What's the downside of waiting for maximizing the price and value?
Well, they're motivated because they're there, and they already have a business objective to do something there. And maybe some other industrial buyer is hot to come to the market, but based on what has transpired so far, that almost 2 years to get a transaction done makes us concerned that if you go out to market, let's say you get some bids, you could end up with the same airport being a part of that bid and coming in less than what they're willing to negotiate on a sole source basis right now, because now they're also seeing who else is motivated and may come back and say, why should we pay 13, 14 million? We'll just wait it out and get it for less. That could happen. So what we're saying is you could do that, and it's your call, but we think you've got a motivated potential buyer who's within the reasonable range. We would encourage you to pursue that opportunity until it doesn't make sense.
And I just sort of adding to Jay's point as well. It's just, I think your point, Trustee Trauber, is well made about there is nothing in here that is commenting on the future of the industrial market in Nashville. What we'd be doing is any delay to the transaction increases risk up and down. And so I guess this is part of the discussion that we're having here is whether deferring for 30 days or 9 months or 18 months, you know, it might go up, but it might also go down. The one thing that's guaranteed is it's introducing a level of uncertainty that if you entered into a bilateral negotiation with, you know, a potentially willing partner, that level of uncertainty is mitigated by that action. And so I think that's really, you know, what we're sort of talking about here. And if the appetite for that level of risk is greater, then fair enough. But our understanding is that, you know, there is a goal to realize the receipts on a timely basis as well as at a appropriate market level. Any other questions on this slide?
I just have one question kind of related to this, but we have to go to the State Building Commission. And so my concern is kind of related to what Trustee Trauber just mentioned, in the sense of if we go before the State Building Commission and they ask us whether or not we attempted to do any type of competitive bidding, which is typical for what the state requires for essentially every entity operating in the state of Tennessee, we won't be able to answer that in the affirmative. And so I'm trying to get a better understanding of how do we justify that before the SBC if someone asks us that question.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And so I think in a previous deck that we presented, we'd kind of gone through the Section 40 requirements for universities to dispose of land. And if it was to another Tennessee agency, and we can get the exact provisions out, our understanding is if it's to another Tennessee public agency, the requirements for testing the market value are waived at that point. It does still need to go before the SBC. That's absolutely correct. But there is a process by which that transfer can be effected in a way that doesn't necessarily require going out to the market. And our advice again would be to kind of then for TSU to lean heavily on the appraisals that it has had done that will act as an approximation of that market testing and then sort of with the rationale that the goal is to bring this transaction to a conclusion and to execution and to realize that receipt as quickly as possible, which would be in keeping with our understanding of Section 40. We would definitely suggest that gets tested, I think, by the university's counsel as well, as we are certainly not lawyers, but that would be the basis on which it does not need to go out for market testing, particularly given that you've had the appraisal done.
Thank you.
That's my understanding how the SBC will look at it as well, what Chris just summarized.
Okay. So yes, we've rather put the cart before the horse on this one somewhat. So yeah, here's the recommended action for us is as we said up front, is that the university has a willing counterparty in terms of the airport authority and an objective valuation of the site around which to set up a negotiation. And our recommendation would be that the university pursues that. What we've got here is that really only just takes us to the first box or two on these lists here. What we've then done is said, depending on how the board decides to move forward with this and the recommendation that it might or the approach that it might take, what we've seen work effectively at other universities, including Howard and the other schools we've advised, is for boards to provide the president and the officers of the university with an authorization to enter into negotiations for the disposal of a site in this kind of instance, but to set that within certain boundaries in terms of valuation, which would then allow flexibility for the detailed terms to be handled by officers, but for the board to know that they have got the ultimate say so in terms of the value by which the university could enter into a transaction. So we haven't stated what we think that range would be. Obviously, you can infer it from our previous slides where we think the negotiation might take place, but we recommend that might be an effective way forward for TSU in this position. And then moving forward and assuming a willing counterparty for negotiation, we provided some indications of the potential time to to take this to the SBC to conclude. So with October being the SBC, if they were to consider it and approve it in October, there's a 2-month lag by which the transaction would need to be completed in order to get in front of the executive committee of the SBC, and then the committee, the commission itself. So we're assuming that completion in August and execution of the deal, at least in principle, with the airport authority subject to SBC approval, that would allow for an October approval and formal execution. So this is just a recommendation at this point for the board's consideration. And happy to field any questions on any of this is the last slide, and happy to field any questions on the remainder.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the board members represented here tonight? If there are no,
Yes,
yes.
I do have some more questions, but I did want to see if no one else has questions. I know I've been dominating the time on this portion of the presentation, but if no one else has any questions, I have just a few to run through. So
Trustee, go
one,
ahead. Please proceed.
oh, well, no, I think Trustee Qualls raised her hand. I can defer to her since I've already asked.
Well, this is your area of expertise, Charles, so we appreciate you lending it to us in this discussion. But Chair Towns, this is another process question. This is Finance Committee still with this recommendation? And will this go to the full board?
Yes, and I would defer to the secretary for questions of procedural matters and process. But yes, we will act on a resolution that would go to the full board depending on the actions of this committee. Madam
Okay.
Secretary, if that's incorrect, please
That's
correct me.
correct, ma'am.
I'll hold my comments for full board. Thank you.
You're welcome. Chair,
Hey,
Trustee
Trustee
Trauber.
Qualls, just so you know, for tonight, I know we would like to hold comments for the full board, but considering it's already 8 p.m. and we have a 3-hour window, I think it would probably be best to try to get through any questions that you have now, so that we can move quickly through the full board.
No, I think it's probably better and appropriate once it gets to the full board, because I'm not a committee member and I just like it on the record for full board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Trauber, your questions?
Yes, I wanted to take 2 steps back. On the first step back, I wanted to know, and I don't know if this is for you, Trustee Towns, or for the administration, but I noted that these materials were not in the board portal for review before this meeting. Was there a reason that board members or trustees did not have an opportunity to review this information beforehand?
Trustee Trauber, I am going to defer to the secretary. The materials in my packet are the same materials that you have. What is included in my packet from the board portal is a resolution. So I will have to defer to the secretary or to Hyatt Brown.
Not received these materials in advance as a submission for the board materials. It's just a presentation deck Hyatt Brown folks brought with them, so no particular reason, sir.
Because I think it would be helpful. I mean, this is a significant proposal that's in front of us. It would have been, I think, appropriate and helpful to have materials related to this item well in advance of reviewing them and seeing them for the first time during the meeting. And I think that does put us at somewhat of a disadvantage to analyze this matter and think of questions that we may want to ask in anticipation of taking the action. For example, maybe someone would have requested to look at the appraisals that have been submitted or requested other information. But taking the second step back, Hyatt Brown mentioned their work with Howard, and I want to understand when they work with Howard, and I'm assuming they work with them on their real estate needs. Did Howard look at their real estate in silo, or were they looking at their real estate in connection with other objectives of the university? And if it was the latter, then the question for our side would be, what are we doing to look at potential real estate sales or real estate objectives in connection with other strategic initiatives?
Yeah, good, very good point, trustee. On the first point, there was no, decision on our part not to share anything. I think we just put some slides together to have the presentation and made them available as soon as we had them available. So I apologize if we were late getting this done. I would hope that some of the underlying data that's in these slides had been discussed previously and were in some other form, but be that as it may, we apologize for that. There was no intention to not share, the information from High Brown's standpoint. Yes, the real estate strategy we have with Howard is a part of a bigger strategy to, it's one of sort of three prongs to help bring the university, to help leverage the university's real estate assets as a way to generate revenue and fund other capital needs that it wasn't able to go out and borrow in the market. So there was an entire plan put together where we identified sort of what we did here, all of the potential assets for monetization, and we prioritized those. And then the board gave the executive staff the authority to execute within a set of guiding principles across a large portfolio of transactions that got dealt with much the same way we're looking at here. We've executed probably 15 transactions to date, to the tune of about $300 million of land value that accrued to Howard. The board dedicated those proceeds to fund future capital projects. They made a decision not to use the capital proceeds from monetization of real estate to fund operating deficits, but rather to invest in other capital. And so short answer is, yeah, it was part of a bigger strategy to leverage real estate as a way to help stabilize their financial situation and address their deferred maintenance. For Howard, a lot of this excess real estate came with a cost: insurance, maintenance, protection. And so the desire was to get that deferred maintenance cost off their books and generate revenue that could be used for other capital projects.
And with that, maybe President Tucker, you can speak to how the university administration is analyzing this potential real estate transaction and a larger strategy for the university, and what specifically would be the plan or projects or strategy for any funds that would come from a sale.
Yeah, thanks for that, Charles. And I think from a university perspective, the number one impediment to driving enrollment in the future years is modernizing our dorms on campus. We're not competitive in that space in terms of quality dorms. And I think we all know that the state doesn't fund dormitories. So this opportunity with this cash that potentially could come in allows us to very quickly begin to focus on upgrading some of our dorms. And I think that's very important for us to continue with the enrollment growth as we go forward. I think assets downtown is a whole different picture in terms of the value of those and the strategic value of what they bring to the university, and how we monetize those are totally different in terms of maybe development people that we partner with that can then set up 99-year leases and create recurring revenue for the university. This particular one, I think, is a great opportunity to take advantage of sooner, because cash is king, and it gives us a chance to begin modernizing a lot of those dorms on campus.
So, and mentioning the dorms, is this specific? Because I'm not aware of any specific plans or strategies that have been presented to the board, or is that just an aspirational thought that you have in the moment of kind of, because I think what I'm trying to understand is based on what Jay Brown mentioned, Howard had a very structured approach and a three-pronged approach to looking at their real estate sales and how they would approach it and how it would work into deferred maintenance or other items with the strategy of the university. And I'm just wondering, do we have anything specific, or are we just talking aspirational things rather than actually working towards something? Because I imagine whatever the sale number is on this site, it's not going to be enough to build an actual dorm. And what would we have specifically lined up that would, be appropriate for the real estate transaction?
Will has got his hand up, so I'll let him respond to that. But I do think I agree. You won't be able to build a brand new dormitory, but it can make a significant difference in terms of upgrading those that we have today. Go ahead, Will, if you want to add to that.
Thank you. I'd just like to add that what Hyatt Brown said for Howard's condition is very similar to TSU. We have worked with the state, we've worked with THEC, TBR, and Dober Litsky Matthew to do the space utilization study. That study told us that we had more space than we needed for our academic needs. That factor is what gave us the properties to present to Hyatt Brown. So I would argue that Hyatt Brown's work is advancing TSU's goal of determining what's the best course of action with property that has not been studied as academically essential. And then how does TSU best leverage that property for the advancement of other items that make it more competitive in terms of enrollment and retention? So I don't think anything that Jay said, and Jay, you're welcome to clarify, but in the many meetings that we've had weekly, we are walking out the fourth and fifth step of what we started a year ago when we got the space utilization study and we had a chance for Hyatt Brown to look at the properties that it told us were not academically essential. And this is the point of action that we've come to after that period of time.
Well,
So I want to clarify.
I just want to make the point that, what I understood from Jay is, and I think, Will, you may be looking at it just from real estate in a silo versus real estate funding various strategic initiatives of the university. And that's the piece that I'm more focused on, and also the specificity of what those plans are versus aspirational discussion of what we could do in certain areas versus actually seeing something on slides set out with a plan of where funds would go. And that's what I think would be more helpful to understand how this feeds into the overall strategy of the university. If it is from deferred maintenance or it is improvements to dorms, to actually see something on a slide, see a formal plan that's produced, which I assume, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, that would have been the way Howard approached it. And I'm not saying we have to be like Howard, but I think some of the things they did could be instructive to how we approach our decisioning.
I mean, both you and Will to me are saying the same thing, because we, if you recall, Trustee, in December or whatever, when we presented to the state, we put together sort of a strategy. It maybe wasn't all the details of how the money would be used and what those investments would go towards. So maybe there were components, because what we worked on did have a narrow focus, but it was ostensibly based on real estate strategy and the broader, strategy around how do you leverage underutilized real estate to fund mission critical things. That's where we got started when we came in last fall. I guess it was last fall. Yeah, I mean, I feel like what we've done in terms of looking at the downtown sites, looking at this site, and doing that overall real estate strategy that we presented to the state in the fall is really about your overall strategy. Can that be fine-tuned and made better and dealt with, more holistically? That's the university's call.
Yeah, well, and two things. One, I mean, that's that strategy was presented to the state, not to this board. And just to make sure we're on the same page, when you were working with Howard, were they talking about things aspirationally that they wanted to do, or did they have plans or at least some strategy that had been commemorated to writing of how they were approaching real estate as part of their three-pronged strategy? And I have one more question after this, just for
Yeah,
President
if you,
Tucker.
because I failed to recognize Chair Winton. So after you ask your last question, I'd like to move to Chair Winton. And then I do believe we have a proposed action that I'm going to ask the president to summarize and present to us.
I don't have anything. I
You
already
don't?
asked the question. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Trustee Trauber.
Would you like me to respond to that, trustee?
Yes, please.
The short answer is it was aspirational, but it was aspirational with some foundational, objectives in mind, some of which I already spoke to. We then put meat on those bones by the university has sort of identifies, much like Will has done, what were the underutilized assets
Well, and
that.
I just want to be clear on this, Jay. I'm not talking just specifically about real estate. If I understood your
Okay.
their three-prong approach, real estate was one piece, but there were these other pieces about capital,
Fair.
operations, and strategy. And I'm asking, were those things just purely aspirational? And ultimately, was anything commemorated to writing to show trustees or show what the real estate strategy and how that fed into the overall strategy of the university, not just the one leg of real estate?
Fair enough. A lot. Some of that what we weren't privy to everything because some of that was internal business operations and how they were making decisions about right sizing their business operations, dealing with all the stuff you guys said earlier. Difficult revenue and internal operational issues. We were focused on the real estate stuff, but it was very much aspirational, and the one major aspiration was to improve the housing stock. And just as President Tucker said, so a lot of the conversation was around stopping the bleeding on the operational side, leverage real estate, and invest in improvement to the dormitories first and foremost. And then we executed on that vision. But it was very much a vision, but grounded in some thoughtful outcomes.
Okay.
So I want to interject real quick. I want to say this, Charles. When you say aspirational, can you in 30 seconds or less clarify what you mean there? Because I want to be clear about there are mission critical pieces that don't give us the chance to get aspirational. It's how we respond to the core needs. So what are you referring to when you say aspirational?
When I say aspirational, what I'm hearing when I ask the question are things that we could use the money for. What I'm saying is nothing has been presented to this board that is written down on a piece of paper that concretely states what the money would be used for. So for me, aspirational is things are being discussed and talked in meetings, but nothing has been commemorated to a writing that has been presented to this trustee board. And I think I mentioned it, a few times during this conversation about, aspirational versus we actually have direction and actually have a path forward that we're looking at, and we actually have a goal that we're trying to reach. But I just wanted to move to my last question just to wrap this up, and this is changing gears just a little bit. And President Tucker, I don't know if this question is for you or Secretary Brown, but I know it's been in the news that the airport authority has been undergoing some changes due to state laws, and then there has been a lawsuit filed. Would that impact negotiations in any way, that we would be entering into negotiations with an entity whose board or the authority would be in active litigation? And would that somehow threaten how the negotiation would transpire or proceed?
I don't think so, but I'll let the lawyers speak to that. But
I'm not familiar with that particular piece of litigation, what it would entail and how that would pose any risk to a proposed offer.
Well, and just to be clear, from my understanding, the state had passed a law to where they would have the authority to appoint all of the airport authority board members versus the local government. And the current board consists of the local government appointees. So potentially there could be a change in appointees. And I don't know if that affects the airport authority's director or president, however he's titled, his ability to negotiate a final document that the airport would be proceeding with us if we chose to move forward with this transaction.
There's still a little bit of a chicken and egg, but sometimes you just have to get in there and see what happens. So I think in this case, that what if could that happen? Maybe, but I think you got to start the process at some point to see what the opportunity is to reach a goal.
Yeah. All right, thank you all. This has been a good discussion to all the contributors, Hyatt Brown and all the trustees. Thank you. Madam Secretary, is it appropriate for the president to give us a high level of the resolve clauses so that we can take action on this resolution, or does that come from you?
I mean, I'm taking my lead from this committee and how we are wanting to proceed. Or is the committee looking for a motion to pass a resolution
Yes.
directing some action?
Yes, it is, but the committee has not received, unless there are no questions. So let me back up. There's a resolution included in your packet regarding uh, real property. Are there any questions to that resolution that was included in your packet?
I don't know that there was a resolution including in the packet, Trustee Town. So that's what I'm trying to get clarification on.
Look in the board portal. That's the only place I would have gotten it, but anyway.
What does the resolution read? Because again, that was one of my questions about taking a step back. There were no materials and I'm not aware of what the resolution is.
Yes, so Trustee Towns, that was a proposed resolution language that was emailed over to you, but that was not included in the board materials. So really, again, I think and President Tucker, you can pipe in here if you have a different view, but my question is it the board's intention to direct some action? And that could be a motion to propose a resolution along the lines of what this recommendation is, to authorize this TSU University staff to effectuate this transaction with the MNAA. Is that what this committee is proposing? And then if so, you can make that motion. And then I did draft some proposed resolution language, which you all will need to make sure is consistent with whatever process you see or vision you have for this particular transaction and how it would be outlined.
Secretary Brown, may I ask if you would put the recommendation on the screen? Because this is the Hyatt Brown steps in the process that I see. Or am I looking at the wrong thing?
You're looking on your screen right now, you're looking at the recommended action by Hyatt Brown. So if
Okay.
you'll give me just a moment, I can pull up the proposed resolution language for you all to review. Give me just a second.
And is that related to the item number 8 on the agenda, which states consideration and possible action regarding real estate transaction action? Is that what you're pulling up?
Yes, it's the resolution if that's how you want to proceed. I just want to check with our IT support. If I take over sharing the screen, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a proposed resolution, which the board may consider and may want to use and further edit. So would you like me to read it out loud?
Can you read the resolve clauses? But I do want to restate that there is an item 8 on the Finance Committee agenda. That item 8 is to take action on the consideration and possible action regarding a real estate transaction. So this is noted on our approved agenda.
Yes, ma'am. I'm moving down to the resolutions. It says, now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby approves the sale of the property as stated herein, specifically the 25 acres at 7200 Cockrell Bend Boulevard, upon terms and conditions determined by the board to be in the best interest of the university and consistent with applicable law. Be it further resolved that the president of Tennessee State University is authorized and directed to undertake all actions necessary or desirable to effectuate the listing of the property for sale for 30 days, including but not limited to coordinating with state agencies, governmental entities, legal counsel, and other professionals necessary to facilitate the property listing, obtaining any approvals, consents, reviews, or authorizations required by applicable law, regulations, policies, or procedures, and executing and delivering any instruments and documents necessary to list the property for sale. The president shall bring all offers on the property to the board for its final approval. If no acceptable offers are proposed, then the board will reconvene to consider approval to sell the property to the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority. So again, this was one proposed way that the board could go about it, wherein the board would list the property for 30 days, see if there were any offers that came back, and then if no offers for 30 days, then to sell to the Metro Nashville Airport Authority. But that's not exactly what's been proposed by Hyatt Brown tonight. Be it further resolved that the president may delegate administrative responsibilities associated with the transaction to the appropriate university personnel, provided that the president retains overall responsibility for ensuring compliance with this resolution and applicable law. And be it finally resolved that the acting secretary of the board shall certify that the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees approved this resolution on the 23rd day of June, 2026 in a special called meeting. Such resolution shall be maintained and publicly posted by the acting secretary of the board in a time and manner as required by law. So, Trustee Towns, the question that I would have for you is if this is a motion and this is the part of discussion or point of discussion for this committee, is this how this committee wants to proceed with the particular action of posting for 30 days and then coming back with further approval to sell to the Metro Nashville, or is there some other
Yes.
option that this board wants to pursue?
So we're going to take action of the committee. So you've heard the resolve clauses of the resolution. Item
Trustee
8.
Towns, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but just for clarification, I know the item was on the agenda, but just for clarification, this resolution was not included with the board materials and neither was the presentation, or am I missing something?
I did not send out the board packet, so I again would rely on the secretary.
The
So
presentation deck was not included with this, Trustee Trauberg. There were materials that were provided at the past meeting, but no, there was no new materials presented. This resolution was not included in the materials.
Okay, thank you.
and so there is an item number 8. Consideration and possible action regarding real estate transaction. There is an action on our agenda that we should act on tonight. That action is to authorize the president to take actions necessary to complete a real estate transaction for the properties discussed this evening, on the property discussed this evening. Is that not correct? Is that not what this item 8 is?
Is that, if that's a question for me, Trustee Towns? Yes, that is what the action item is for.
I would like to, is there any discussion regarding item 8?
I think the only thing that we need some clarification from the university is what are you all recommending for us to do? We have a recommendation from Hyatt Brown that suggests that we should not put the property up for sale for 30 days. We then have a resolution before us that outlines putting the property up for sale for 30 days and then proceeding with a sale accordingly if we do not receive any additional interest. So the question I think that Chair Towns has been trying to get some clarification on is what is the university's recommendation so we can take the action according to what the university is recommending for us to consider.
And I will defer to the president on that one.
Yeah, my recommendation would be in line with what was submitted by the Hyde Brown, which would be to move on to give the approval for the president to move forward with an agreement with the the airport authority. Now, if the board decides that they want to add the 30 days in there, then that's something we can do. But my recommendation would to follow the recommendations that Hyde laid out.
Okay, we have heard a recommendation from the president. Is there a motion to advance the recommendation of the president to the full committee?
I had a quick question, Trustee Towns. I don't know if you can see my hand raised.
I cannot, but please proceed.
Yes. So a real estate transaction in 30 days for a property such as this, I mean, is that even out? Can that even move that fast in terms of getting it on and seeing if somebody's ready to purchase it? And then if nothing moves in 30 days, then we're proceeding to go directly to the airport authority. This seems like the time doesn't make sense to me. What is the purpose of the 30 days? And part two to that question is, are we accepting, and I know I'm not on the committee, but this is just from my understanding, is the committee accepting this resolution as written, or is it necessary to make some edits so that the timing of this makes sense?
Trustee Chapman, good evening. Let me try and respond to you. So the action before us is not on the resolution.
Got it.
The action before us is on the recommendation that the president has just presented, and that is to proceed with the work around a real estate transaction to sell the property to the airport authority. That is what is before us now. That's the recommendation. It is not the resolution that is on the screen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there a motion on the recommendation as presented by the president?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been motioned and seconded to approve the recommendation made by President Tucker this evening. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Aye.
trustee Trevor,
No.
trustee Winton,
Aye.
the motion passes.
Thank you so very much. It is late in the hour. I want to begin by thanking April and her finance team, President Tucker, the Hyatt Brown team, and to all of the trustees. Thank you for your engagement this evening. Thank you for your tough questions. This is our work and we will continue to do it. I will now ask if there's any additional business to come before this committee.
Chair Towns, I do have a clarifying question. I realize I'm not on the committee, but I am looking at the action item in the board packet, and the specific motion or action that is listed is I move to recommend adoption of the proposed resolution by the Board of Trustees.
That is always draft language that the university provides as a courtesy when when styling those action item cover sheets, but by no means is the committee obligated to accept any kind of scripted or proposed language. So I would just note that for point of clarification, Trustee Pauls.
Thank you.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, thank you. Thank you for that question. All right, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Seconded? Is there a second to adjourn?
Second.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Trauber,
Yes.
trustee Winton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so very much. I will sign off the microphone.
I know we have been going for quite some time. This meeting was scheduled to go for 3 hours. I am going to suggest, because I don't think any of us have had a facilities break, for 7 minutes and for us to get resumed for the full board meeting at 8:50 p.m. Central Time.
So noted. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hey, someone who's on break is not muted.
All right, are we ready? All right, are we ready? Okay, well, good evening and welcome everyone. The June 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is now 8:51 p.m. Central Time. And at this time, we will need to call the roll. Secretary Brown, would you please call the roll?
Chair Winton,
Here.
Trustee Trauber,
Present.
Trustee Chapman, Trustee Chapman is not on. Trustee Smith Knight,
Present.
Trustee Norfleet is not on. Trustee Qualls,
Present.
Trustee Smith,
Present.
Trustee Towns,
Here.
Trustee Tirabiti.
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum present, and I would ask, is there anyone here on the meeting this evening who cannot speak or hear one another? Okay, and is there anyone here on the meeting this evening who has another person there present with them? And if so, can you please identify that person? None noted. Thank you. Madam Chair, we have a quorum present. We may proceed.
Okay, thank you for everyone staying on so late tonight. I really do appreciate the time. We will try to move this as quickly as possible. And so the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And so with that, is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as contained in the materials for the June 23rd, 2026 board meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I did want to note that Trustee Qualls, am I correct that you wanted to remove items for the consent agenda? And I would also note that we did have some items that came out of the Finance Committee that were not unanimously approved. So I did want to note that we would proceed without the consent agenda.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. And who is the mover on that motion? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Trustee Smith.
Okay, and then the second?
Seconded as amended. We've done that, yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I will now call the roll. Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Trauber,
So just for clarification, what is on the agenda now? And are there no items on the consent agenda?
yes, sir, that's correct. It's the same agenda minus the consent agenda. So
Okay.
any items for the consent agenda would be moved to the regular agenda.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yes, sir. Trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
Trustee Qualls,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
and Trustee Tirabiti.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee report. The chair recognizes the committee chair, Trustee Tish Towns, who will provide a report on the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Chair Winton. Yes, I am pleased to report that our Finance Committee met earlier this evening. During that meeting, we took action on 5 items that we voted on to advance to the board. Madam Chair, at your discretion, I will report out on each of these items at your direction.
Thank you. If you will start with the use of the out-of-state undergraduate tuition and fees revenue policy, which was approved by the Finance Committee.
Yes, and if CFO Robinson is still here and we have questions, I'm sure she'll be happy to ask them. But in accordance with the new state law, the Finance Committee voted to recommend to the board approval of a new policy, which is the use of out-of-state undergraduate tuition and revenue fees. This action was taken by the Finance Committee on a vote of 2-1. And if there are questions, again, I would defer to CFO Robinson.
And Trustee Towns, are you moving on behalf
I am
of the
moving
Finance
on
Committee?
behalf of the Finance Committee that the full Board of Trustees accept the recommendation from the Finance Committee.
And I'll second that.
Chair, may I proceed with calling the roll on the motion?
There's discussion. Are you? Madam
Is
Chair?
there any discussion?
Yes. I would like to recommend, or I'd like to move that we make an amendment to the policy to include the language that says the policy should include a clear annual reporting requirement to the board, specifically the amount of undergraduate tuition and fees generated, how those funds were used, what portion was used to mitigate the in-state undergraduate students, and how they align with the enrollment assumptions for the approved budget. It is not a change to the policy itself. It's just something that helps with our accountability, particularly given that 50% or sometimes almost 50% of our tuition is based on out-of-state undergraduate tuition and fees.
CFO Robinson, is this information something that you guys typically provide, or can it be provided? I guess what I'm trying to make sure is that is this information that we can get and that there's a process to ensure that we receive this information.
How much is generated from out-of-state undergraduate tuition, yes, that is easily accessible. I do want to make sure that I call out in the procedures of the policy, in the procedures of the policy, we mentioned that this is a process that will be in conjunction with our annual budgeting process. And so the uses, while meant to provide the university with the most flexibility, a reporting requirement, if asked for it to be, very detailed and specific, could be a challenge.
And may I address, CFO Robinson, it doesn't necessarily have to be very detailed, but even in accordance with the policy as written, if we have the funds, and we can easily get the undergraduate tuition and how much we're deriving from out of state. And I know the policy doesn't mandate, it doesn't say shall or must use, but in those instances where we are using it, an annual report to the board would be very helpful so that we can better understand how we're using those undergraduate tuition fees.
Understood.
Thank you, Trustee Smith.
Is that hard? I mean, I don't want to put an additional burden, but I think that's for an accountability purpose for the board and as fiduciaries and given oversight, I think that it's a small step to help with oversight.
I guess to express a concern here that if it's not detailed and very prescriptive, then I would ask the question of then,
What is it?
yes.
We can make it as detailed as needed, but I don't want to put an additional burden. How detailed? If we have undergraduate tuition and fees, and if the policy or the law says that we need a plan that shows how we're using our undergraduate tuition and fees to mitigate, or I forget the exact language, but to underwrite or mitigate some of the in-state students, whether that's tuition or some other services. If we have those funds, and in those instances where we're using them, how are we using them? So what mechanism do we have as a board to understand or to know when those undergraduate fees come in, how they're being used to offset the in-state undergraduate, the in-state undergraduates?
Well, then my question would then lie, would this board want to look back, or would you want how we're planning to use those funds? So just like we provided a proposed budget for F-27, is the reporting on the budget, on the plan, or is the reporting a year in arrears, basically, of the uses? Plan uses or actual uses?
Actual uses.
Okay, so the reporting structure will then be a year out as required by semester or by year. Like, these are the types of that I wouldn't want to create an incremental reporting burden for the university. If the language can remain flexible, just like the policy was written to provide the university flexibility in the uses, then I think that would be agreeable.
Let me make sure I understood what you were saying, CFO Robinson. So what you're recommending is that we keep the policy as is, and that you will come back to the board with how you can address the requests made by Trustee Qualls.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Trustee Smith Knight.
I'm confused. Was there a motion or a second for the amendment?
No.
Okay. All right. So then I am just wanting to point out that in reviewing this same policy with other universities, what we have is very consistent. And I think it's important that we remain consistent from a policy perspective.
Trustee Smith Knight, which institutions have you reviewed? I know ours is almost a carbon of MTSU, but some of the other institutions don't have theirs written out like this. They've added maybe a line or two to an existing policy.
So I did look at the MTSU policy, but my point would be is if we're consistent with I would say some best practices for these, this probably is what we want to continue. I don't think we need to create additional verbiage unnecessarily. I think this, for the purpose of the policy itself, we need to be consistent.
Trustee Trauber.
Just the one comment that I had and also mentioned in the committee meeting, and understanding that consistency with other universities, just that we appear to be dissimilar to the majority of them, except for CFO Robinson mentioned the University of Tennessee, which I think there was some clarity around, or maybe lack of clarity around, what their policy is and how that is viewed in light of our policy, whether it's the same or similar. But I think our policy should be mirroring an institution that is similar to ours. And if there's not an institution similar to ours, because we have a higher percentage of out-of-state tuition revenue, that's where I go back to what I mentioned in the committee meeting about understanding what's going on in the higher education landscape across the United States, and whether there are other states with similar laws or similar objectives in states trying to have their universities come up with a methodology of how they are using out-of-state tuition to mitigate the cost for in-state students.
Thank you. Trustee Smith Knight, did you have your hand back up?
Yes, I call for the question.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the out-of-state undergraduate tuition and fees revenue policy as approved by the Finance Committee. Secretary Brown, would you please call the roll?
Chair Winton,
Yes.
trustee Trauber,
Yes.
trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
trustee Qualls,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Tiraviti.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, Trustee Towns, you are back recognized for the next item on the agenda for the approval of the fiscal year 2024-2025 tuition and mandatory fees increase.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Finance Committee met today to discuss and take action on this item. The committee voted 3-1 to advance this recommendation to the full board, and that is to approve the FY 2026-27 tuition and mandatory fees increase. And on behalf of the Finance Committee, I move to approve this recommendation.
I'll second that. Is there any additional discussion? Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
trustee Trauber,
No.
trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
trustee Qualls,
No.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Tiraviti.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Trustee Towns, you are recognized on the approval of fiscal year 2025-2026 estimated budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, the Finance Committee in its meeting earlier this evening voted to recommend to the full board approval of the 2025-2026 estimated budget. I present this recommendation to the board for approval.
Is there, I'm sorry, is there a second? If not, I will second. The chair seconds. Secretary Brown, is there any additional discussion?
I had one comment or
Okay.
one question really for Trustee Towns and then also Secretary Brown, or whichever one can answer. Does TBR require that we pass a balanced budget? And with that balanced budget, how would whatever law or requirement there is with TBR to pass a balanced budget, how do they review non-recurring sources of funding, such as the MOU funds, that would potentially support recurring structural costs long-term?
Trustee Trauber, that's not an answer that I would know. I would have to research that. I don't know if Ms. Robinson happens to know the answer to that, but if so, I'd kick it to her. But I suspect that someone would need to research that and come back with that information.
Trustee Trauber, I would almost echo the comments made by Secretary Brown. And so if we would like to have CFO Robinson at a future Finance Committee meeting share that information. I'm sure she will be happy to provide that update.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Trauber,
I abstain.
Trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
Trustee Qualls,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
Trustee Tirviti,
Yes.
passes.
Thank you. Trustee Towns, you are recognized on the next item of the agenda, which is the approval of the fiscal year 2026-2027 proposed budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, during our Finance Committee meeting earlier this evening, the committee voted to recommend to the full board the approval of the FY 26-27 proposed budget. You have this information in your board materials. And with that, I move to approve the recommendation of the FY 2026-2027 budget as approved by the Finance Committee.
The chair will second that motion. Is there any additional discussion?
Yes, I have a question. Chair Winton,
Yes.
we just approved a tuition and mandatory fee increase that is not reflected in the budget that was approved by the Finance Committee. How do you handle that particular situation with us approving this budget?
I'm not sure I'm reconciling what you're saying.
Is the tuition and fee increase included in the budget that the Finance Committee recommended for approval?
No, it is not. However, the materials provide what that proposed budget would look like, incorporating the proposed budget. The reason why it was presented, the tuition and mandatory fees increase, and the proposed budget was presented in the way that it was, so that it could be clear of what will be shown if we approve the tuition and mandatory fee increase, and if we did not approve that tuition and mandatory fee increase. So we have those documents available to the board in the portal that shows what the proposed budget would be with that 4.1% increase, but the university could not provide that as the exact action for today before we got the tuition and mandatory fees increase incorporated into and approved tonight.
So for clarity, what do we vote? The motion was to approve the budget that the Finance Committee approved and recommending to the board. But that's not the budget that we will be abiding by for FY 27?
The budget for FY 2026-2027, as it's noted on here, is a proposed budget. When we come back, we will get the actual budget, which will incorporate the tuition and mandatory fees increase that was just approved just moments ago.
So just again, for clarity, when you
And
say when
again,
we
for
come back,
clarity, I've answered that question 3 times at this point, so I'm not exactly sure where the confusion is. The 2026-2027 proposed budget that is before everyone tonight that the Finance Committee approved does not include the tuition and mandatory fees increase. However, we will be operating under the 2026-2027 budget as proposed, which will include the tuition and mandatory fees increase, and it's in your board portal for your review at any point in time.
thank you.
You're welcome. Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
Trustee Trauber,
I abstain. Excuse me, I abstain.
Trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
Trustee Qualls,
Abstain.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Towns,
Yes.
and Trustee Tirviti.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And the last item on the agenda tonight that I believe is the consideration and action regarding the real estate transaction as approved by the Finance Committee. Trustee Towns, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm just going to say thank you to the board once again for your patience this evening. The last item heard by the Finance Committee meeting this evening was action number 8 on our agenda. That is consideration and possible action regarding a real estate transaction. For this item, we heard from Hyatt Brown. They presented us with an update on the work that they've done throughout the last year, as well as some recommended steps regarding this transaction. Following a lengthy discussion and proposed language, the Finance Committee voted to advance a recommendation to the full Board of Trustees. That motion was to approve the delegation of authority to the President to act on the recommendations contained in the Hyatt Brown presentation. Madam Chair, the Finance Committee voted to move this motion to the board. I now ask for approval of the motion from the Finance Committee.
The chair will second. Is there any additional discussion?
Yes, just for the record, Madam Chair, the material that was submitted, it's been customary that the board receive material to review before the board meeting, whether we're on the committee or in the full board. The discussion that occurred regarding this potential action regarding the real estate transaction with the Tune property, I think it's too critical of a decision to make without trustees, i.e., one, I'll just say for me, trustees, because the other trustees may feel as though they've had sufficient time to review and really digest what this means, particularly with the sale of property. We're not getting any more land made on the earth. And so before we make a decision to sell this property, it would be nice to have had this information prior to the meeting.
Thank you,
Just
and
wanted to note that
I
for the
appreciate
record.
you
Thank
saying
you.
that. But just as was noted during the discussion, this information was actually provided to us on the May 15th board meeting. So we had this discussion previously with the anticipation that we would come back and have this discussion tonight. It was just presented in a different way, but the slides that were presented are the same that we already have that were in the meeting on May 15th.
And the resolution that was shared by Secretary Brown, that was provided to us as well?
No, but we did not
Okay,
pass that
thank you.
resolution.
Chair Winton, I had a few comments to make.
Absolutely, please.
Thank you. So I echo the concerns about the materials or the lack thereof being presented to trustees before this meeting, and just my position, I would be more comfortable about taking this action up if the materials were provided before the meeting. From what I recall on the meeting that was held on the 15th, there was discussion of evaluation. There was not discussion of a potential transaction or a potential transaction with the sole source. I'd also would feel more comfortable with taking this proposed action or voting in the affirmative if there was more trustee participation and thought and conversation around this matter. Also lacking comfort with the lack of a similar three-pronged strategy that Hyatt Brown mentioned that they experienced when they worked on real estate with Howard. Also would feel more comfortable with potentially taking this action if we thought more strategically about maximizing the value of the property through some type of competitive bidding process. I also just want to make sure stated on the record for this meeting, just whether or not there is any potential effect that if we do move forward with a sole source negotiation with the airport authority, what, if any, impact there would be from the airport authority's active litigation involving its commissioners or its board members. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Are there any additional discussion? Is there any additional discussion? Great. Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
trustee Trobert,
No.
trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
trustee Qualls,
No.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Tirabiti,
No.
we have three noes, 4 yeses, the yeses have it.
All right, with the business outline as noticed in the agenda completed, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Thank you. Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Chair Winton,
Yes.
trustee Trobert,
Yes.
trustee trustee Smith Knight,
Yes.
trustee Qualls,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Towns,
Yes.
trustee Tirabiti,
Yes.
motion passes.
The motion is approved. The time is 9:21 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you all for your time tonight. I hope you are able to spend just a little bit of time with your family and your loved ones. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.